Hi, welcome to this lab. In this lab, I'm going to show you how to establish network connectivity between the app hosted in App Service Plan and virtual network. And also I'm going to show you how to test this network connectivity. So first of all, let's enable network connectivity for the app. I already created an app in an App Service Plan of standard tier. If you have free or basic or shared, you will not be able to establish network connectivity. So make sure you scale up that. To establish network connectivity, click on networking and then here click on setup. As you can see here, this one is grayed out because it doesn't have a gateway installed on it. So if you click on it, then you can see this virtual network has no gateway. So you can't select it. So let's create a virtual network. I'm going to call this as VNet and I'm going to leave everything as it is. Basically, it is providing CIDR range for the virtual network. And also it is creating a default subnet with an appropriate IP range. It's also creating a gateway subnet with an appropriate range. And also it is providing point to site address block. Okay, so let's click on OK. This is going to take a lot of time. So I'm going to pause this video for a few minutes and come back once the virtual network is successfully created and the gateway is successfully installed. Now our virtual network has been successfully created. You can see it here. So let's close this and you need to set up again because earlier we just created a virtual network. Now you can see here selected and this is going to add virtual network to this web app. While this is happening, I'm going to install a virtual machine on this particular virtual network that we created because I want to demonstrate the connection between the app in App Service and the virtual machine. Okay, so first of all, let me create a virtual machine. Very quickly, I'm going to create this. Then I'm going to use the existing resource group. Location, I'm going to change to UK South. Click on OK. And the size, I'm going to select F1S. And then select. And then here, the virtual network. Why it is not showing the virtual network that we created already? Have we selected the location wrongly? Maybe yes. I don't know. Let me check once. Let's go to resource groups. Oh, they got created in Central US. So we just need to select Central US. Otherwise, you can't have virtual network in one location and virtual machine in different location. Sorry for this. This time you can see by default it is suggesting test VNet because we are creating this virtual machine in the same resource group. Okay, click on OK. Okay, I'm going to open HTTP and RDP. You don't need to open HTTP. Let's unselect this and then leave that and then click on OK. And then click on create. I know you might have noticed that there is an error came. I just need to see what it is. Gateway did not finish. Might be this virtual network gateway is still being installed, still being initiated. So I'm going to add this virtual network to web app after few minutes. But in the meantime, I'm going to publish an app into this app. Is it confusing? So let's go to resource group and just want to show this to you. Here, what I meant is we created an app service, right? Rudran test. Into that, we need to publish some code. That code will in turn trying to access something in the Azure virtual machine situated in virtual network using a private IP. In that way, we can prove that this app service will be able to communicate with that virtual machine. Okay, so let me publish a application very quickly. I'm going to select Azure API app here because I can enable Swagger and I can able to trigger an HTTP action, which will in turn make a web request to the IIS server located in virtual machine. I know it might be a bit confusing to you, but let me show this to you and everything will be clear. Okay, now before I publish it, I just want to enable Swagger UI. So if you come down here, you just need to uncomment a piece of code. And also, I'm going to add some custom code here in order to trigger a web request to the IIS installed in virtual machine. So here, I'm going to change this. We're going to make a HTTP web request. Here I'm going to give an URL. This URL will contain the IP address of that particular virtual machine and a file within www root folder where I'm going to create a small text file once that virtual machine got created. Just follow the steps I'm doing carefully and you will understand in the end. By the way, this IP address, I'm going to replace that with the private IP address of the virtual machine we are just creating once the virtual machine is successfully created. Because it's going to take a lot of time for the virtual machine to get created, in the meantime, I'm just writing the code. Basically what I'm doing is I'm making a web request, get the response and get the handle to the response stream and read the stream to the end and store it in a string. That's it. Now I'm going to build this. And before I publish this code into the app service that we created, I just want to check whether this installation has been completed successfully or not. Looks like the installation has been completed successfully. So let's go to that virtual machine, go to networking, and then you can see the private IP of it. Let's copy this. So that's it. We have successfully written all the code. Now it's time to publish it. This is the app we created. I am publishing the code into that app. However, this might not work because the virtual machine we have created doesn't have IaaS installed by default. So now the next thing we need to do is to install IaaS in this test virtual machine and also create the text file within the www root folder so that our code can access it. In order to log in into this virtual machine, you need to use public IP. And then I'm going to change this public IP to the one I just copied. And everything should be same. What's happening? 1 minute, please. That's it. Somehow it's logged out by itself. Sorry, once again I need to log in. Let's see what's happening. Come on. It's saying this computer has low memory. I'm not sure why. Maybe F1S that we have selected might not have sufficient memory. But let me try to install IaaS on this. So let's go to manage, click on add rules and features, and then select web server, add one. Very simple and straightforward basically. Now IaaS installation has been successfully completed. So let's close this. And the next thing we need to do is to create a small text file in the root folder of IaaS. Here I'm going to create a small file basically. Just like that. I'm just putting some text. So that's it. Let's go to the portal now. And one last thing we need to do. Remember, we got an error when we are trying to connect virtual network to web app. Let's sort out that now. Here it's showing connected, but let's disconnect and connect it again just to make sure it happened properly. Okay, now our app service has been connected to a virtual network properly. So let's close this. Just a quick recap of what we have done so far. Firstly, we created an app service. Sorry, I already created an app service, but I tried to connect the app service to a virtual network, but the virtual network existing is not suitable because it doesn't have a virtual network gateway. So we created a virtual network and connected that virtual network to this app service. That's the first thing we have done. Secondly, we created a virtual machine in the same network and installed IaaS on it. And thirdly, we published some piece of code into Rudra 9 test to access the text file that we created in test machine. Basically, we are enabled IaaS and we are using a web request in order to access that file. Okay, so now it's time to test this. So now let's launch this. Because I enabled Swagger UI, I would be able to view UI for that API now. This is one very good feature that you can use within Azure API app. You can see all the operations, HTTP operations associated with API. Remember, we changed this. Just want to show that to you. So here, if you see, that's the operation that we have changed. We are basically accessing the test.txt and we are returning the content of the file. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will work. Moment of truth. Let's see what happens. There you go. You can see this is working. That's it. Your app is basically able to access a file located in the virtual machine using the private IP address of virtual machine, which proves that the app able to communicate with virtual machine over a private connection. That is how you can able to establish network connection between your apps hosted on app service with virtual network, and thereby communicating with any apps in those virtual network. I hope you find this lab very useful. In the next lecture, I'm going to talk about app service environment and the different ways you can deploy app service environment, thereby different connectivity options you will get with each scenario. So if you have some time, join me in the next lecture.